Hi, everyone.
Hello.
I'm Lauren.
I am Ken.
And this is Paradise After Dark.
Dark.
Paradise After Dark is a Palmahawk Media production covering true crime,
Unsolved mysteries,
missing people,
urban legends,
and strange places.
And be sure to check out our website, paradiseafterdark.com.
On our website, you'll find links to all of our episodes, even the archived ones, our mailing list, merch store, and links to all of our social medias.
It may sound weird, but some of those earlier episodes that are on our website, some of my favorites. While you're there at the website, we also have a little tip jar, so you can swing by there and leave us a tip, and we'll give you a shout out on the show.
This episode is being created in conjunction with our new nonprofit organization, the Florida Themis Project. The Themis Project is highlighting and creating an awareness campaign for Kyle Byrtus this month. If you'd like to help support the Florida Themis Project, please check out our website at floridathemisproject.org, and we are also on all the social medias.
So, Lauren.
We are talking about Kyle Byrtus this month. We are pushing an awareness campaign. This case has been near and dear to us since we started this podcast almost. We first covered this case in 2018. That's when we first met Kyle's mother, Lynn. And it's very sad for us to say that we covered this case 5 years ago. And now, this month, is the 10-year anniversary of Kyle's murder, and the case is still unsolved. We're covering it again now with some new and updated information and another interview with Lynn.
Kyle was a good kid who made some bad choices that ultimately led to his death. So many times we see on TV, read in the news, or just hear of someone who's just gone missing, vanished without a trace. We've done episodes on those cases. Felipe Santos, Terrence Williams, Audrey Desir, and Wendy Hudicock. In these cases, the family gets to a point where they don't even care what happened to their loved one. They just want to know where they are. But what about when the person is found, but their loved ones are left with no clues as to how, why, when, or where?
On August 15, 2013, a man working for Lee County Electric Cooperative, LCEC, made a wrong turn and had to turn around in an undeveloped cul-de-sac in a wooded area of Lehigh Acres, Florida. Much to his shock and horror, this man spotted what he believed to be a deceased person. Lee County Deputy Leslie Green responded and confirmed that the body of a deceased white male lay in the roadway. The man, with his hands tied behind his back and several gunshot wounds, one in his head, several in his torso, and one in his right forearm, was Kyle Byrtus.
In this case, we'll let Lynn tell you most of Kyle's story in her own words. We will be using the original audio from our interview with Lynn from our initial episode. Please stay tuned after the episode for a new interview with Lynn and some updated information.
Please listen to these clips of our interview with Lynn and remember that this is not entertainment. This is a mother who is grieving because she lost her only son. Admittedly, this was a tough story for us to cover. This was a case with very little information at the time, and the case had all but gone completely cold. New cases have come up, and this one, it seems, is just not a top priority for law enforcement these days. But we have a mother and a family who refuses to give up.
They're still searching for answers, and they won't stop until there's justice for Kyle. Kyle wasn't perfect, but he was human. He was murdered, and someone out there knows something.
Kyle Alexander Byrtus was born May 17, 1988 in Hollywood, Florida. As an infant, his mom moved back to Fort Myers, Florida to be closer to family. He was the only son of Lynn Krieger and the oldest grandchild and only grandson to Lynn's parents. He was very close with his grandfather growing up and went on mining expeditions with him as a teen. Kyle also went on several mission trips to Central America with his church youth group. They would perform clown acts and puppets shows for orphanages throughout Guatemala and Honduras. He really looked forward to these trips every year.
He played soccer in middle school, but in high school is where he found his real passion. He was running cross country. His senior year, he was the co-captain of the cross country team and received several scholarships to FAU, Florida Atlantic University, in Boca Raton, Florida. Kyle got straight A's and graduated Fort Myers High School with honors in 2006.
This kid had a smile on his face all the time. I could just, he was just always very, very happy.
And you mentioned he did mission trips when he was younger?
Oh, yeah.
How old was he when he did that?
I think it started, I'm thinking he was in 6th or 7th grade. I let him go only because my sister and her husband were in charge.
And where did he go?
And so, he went to Guatemala and Honduras.
Wow.
I think he went to Honduras a couple times, went to Guatemala, and I really can't tell you if it was 3 or 4 trips that he was on.
I'm sorry, roughly what age was that?
6th or 7th grade.
Wow, that's got to be overwhelming for a child that young.
But exciting.
Yeah, all in one.
Yeah, and it may have been 7th or 8th grade. I think one of his first trips was right after 9/11.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, it was about 7th or 8th grade. Because I remember them coming back and on the plane, and it's kind of funny, but they always brought back, you bring back souvenirs.
Uh-huh.
All the guys had machetes, and they were in their backpacks. And I'm thinking, you got through customs with these things?
Wow.
And I remember it was like the summer after 9/11, so.
Wow. Yeah, that's kind of crazy. But, that's really amazing that he was able to do that, go to those countries. And I'm sorry for my ignorance, but what exactly do they do on these mission trips?
They are church-based.
Right.
And so they go, particular trip, one was they went and visited orphanages, and they would do plays, they did clowns, they would, they had somebody that blew up balloons just to be with the kids and teach them about Jesus, because a lot of them, they've never heard of him before or anything like that, and just spread the word. Okay. And another trip, they went down and helped build a school.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow.
What that had to be exciting to be part of. And he obviously came back and shared this with you?
Oh, yes. We had pictures and everything. Actually, one of the pictures, there is a picture of him holding an iguana on the Crime Stoppers webpage. It's one picture. He was in Guatemala. That's one of the pictures from down there. They have iguanas running everywhere.
Wow.
He was outgoing to a point. It took him a while to warm up to you, but he had some shy qualities. But once, I'm his mother. I didn't see him in school every day, and some of the stories that I hear just, make me smile to know that he was always, helpful to people. And I know there was one friend that said that he was always behind them, pushing them, while they were running. He never really got in. I know of one occasion he got in trouble. He in 9th grade, and it was taken care of. It's under the rug, whatever. Growing up, I think when you leave elementary school, going into middle school, that first year, he always tried to see I think he was testing the teachers to see how far he would push. He could push them. And then afterwards, he was just fine. But he could sit in a room and not crack a book open. And I don't know if I ever saw him doing homework at home. And he got straight A's.
So it just came natural. Some people have that.
And then he ran cross country.
Yes. He made all conference, and then he traveled all over the state. Sometimes the team, they have these invitationals, and he ran at Lakewood Ranch, he ran at Disney World. I think they went to Tallahassee one year for a state competition.
Wow.
The whole team, I think they I don't think they came in first, but he has trophies.
Yeah.
All over. He would do the turkey trot. He did the Veterans Memorial Race across, the Midpoint Bridge here in Cape Coral every year. And I just kind of snicker wondering, where he got this from, because it definitely wasn't inherited.
Yeah.
That's what I tell my family. It always skips generations.
It must have, because, yep, he really, really liked it. And then one time his coach actually took him and several other teammates over to Florida Atlantic University in Boca Raton they did a visit over there. And that's when he came home and said, that's it. Because he always wanted to go to FSU. But when he fell in love with Boca Raton. He goes, Mom, I fit in so well. I'm like, really? Okay.
So, did he get a academic scholarship or a cross-country scholarship?
He actually got both.
Wow.
He got the Bright Futures scholarship through the state because he had a certain GPA, so you get so much. He actually got a scholarship from the Fort Myers Track Club. They give out a certain amount of money to students each year. And then he got so much from Florida Atlantic for, I think it was just for the first semester or whatever, for cross country.
Kyle left for Boca Raton in August of 2006 to start college. His mother, Lynn, recalls a phone conversation she'd had with Kyle while he was away at school. He mentioned that some kids in his dorm had OD'd. Another time she remembers him stating he was stressed and that nothing can prepare you for your first year of college. She wonders if maybe that was the beginning of Kyle's downward spiral.
It's so mind-boggling that Kyle had turned to drugs and whatnot. Because, he had a friend early in school that he told me about after high school that had, become a drug addict. And he was in rehab, and Kyle said, I just can't understand it. I'll never be a druggie. And he actually brought that up later on when he was home after trying to get clean. He brought up that conversation to me. He goes, Mom, I never expected this to happen to me.
It was opioid abuse, right? Pain pills?
Yes.
So I did some research, and I know that the majority of people who become addicted to opioids start out because they had an injury and were legally prescribed them. Did he get hurt or have a surgery or something that maybe introduced him? No?
Nope.
So,
and I've actually not had the nerve to ask any of his friends to say, how did he start this? I have a couple ideas, just maybe it was for recreation or whatever, or for stress, because I remember him always talking about school and everything and how, no one prepares you for this, and he was always stressed out about this, stressed out about that. And so if he could, probably if he could take a pill to calm down, that's what he did.
From everything I've researched and then reading the letters that you've sent me, like you said, it's very mind-boggling because it just seems like Kyle was such a great guy and an athlete and did well in school, and it's like he just made a few bad choices, and that's what makes, to me, in my mind, that's just what makes this case so tragic.
How do you get to this point?
Yeah.
Exactly. And as a mother, no matter what anybody tells you that you shouldn't do this or you shouldn't do that, you always think, what did I do wrong? I don't beat myself up over it all day long, but there are times that I just, where were some signs? How did this happen? Should I have done this? Should I have not done this? You wonder, were you too strict with him? Because we were pretty strict. He had curfews. He got away with a lot of things, but, it's just, you just don't know why any of this happened. Sometimes I wonder, was he clinically depressed? Should I have, but there were no signs of that I could see.
Not long after, Kyle was put on probation at FAU and eventually dropped out. Kyle returned home to his family in Fort Myers. Now, being home again with rules and a curfew after being away on his own didn't work out well for him. Although he was working, according to his mother, Kyle refused to follow rules or make curfew. He was coming home at all hours of the night. Now, Lynn worried about her son, but at the time she never imagined it was drugs. She assumed he was just out drinking with his friends. He had a car, which was a gift he received from his parents for graduation. After he came home from Boca, his parents gave him the option of transferring it to his own name and assuming responsibility for it, but he didn't want to do that. They eventually took the car away, and Kyle decided to return to Boca Raton, where he stayed for another 5 years. Now, he rented places with a few of his former classmates from FAU, but they moved each year when the lease was up.
While in Boca, he worked at several different restaurants to support himself. He came home for the holidays, but only stayed for a day or so. If he stayed longer than that, his mother noticed that he always got sick. Looking back, she realized he was probably going through withdrawals.
In 2012 is when his friend Spencer had his mom. Spencer knew where my sister lived in Fort Myers because he would always drop Kyle off because they lived in the same neighborhood. Mm-hmm. And so he had his mom go over to my sister's house and tell them that, Kyle was in trouble and someone needed help. So we all got together, and that's when my brother-in-law and my dad went over to Boca at his apartment, and he was just walking down the sidewalk and he saw him. And they sat and talked to him for a while, and he said, "Yes, I'll come home."
Now, was Spencer over there in Boca Raton with Kyle?
He had gone to FAU also. He actually had graduated and had a good job in it. Yes.
Okay.
So they were friends in high school, and then they were over in Boca. But how did he know what was going on with Kyle to tell his mother to bring it to your attention?
He had seen Kyle decline, and apparently Kyle did tell him. I'm not 100% sure about that, but he knew what was going on. And it was just getting worse. Apparently 1 or 2 pills is okay, but, when you're up to 10 and 12 a day, something's, yeah.
So, did he get sober for a little while he was home?
For a little while, yes, he did. And, he actually started running again. It took him a very long time to get to that point because the drug did do so much damage to his muscles, and he was having, leg pains and everything. He actually was working for a landscape company. He got a job. He was working for a landscape company, and I don't know if he got bit by a spider or if he had gotten poked with a, palm frond or something, but like right on the top of his hand. At first I thought, oh my gosh, he's shooting up again, because it was right there at the top of the vein. They'd called me and my dad had taken him to, his hand swelled up ginormously. They took him to the emergency room and I went there and my dad asked him, "Can we do a tox screen while you're here?" He goes, "Yeah, go ahead." It came back clean. So yeah, he was clean for a while. He did have a friend that passed away. I think it was in January. He found out a friend of his had passed away over in Boca. It was in a car accident. He took it very bad. And he apparently found something somewhere and took something. And my parents found him on the bathroom floor. And so, he came to and everything, and he was fine. But we just said, we're just going to talk to you tomorrow. You're out of it right now. Go to bed. He actually was looking into signing up with Army. He He actually had an appointment the next day, and he couldn't go because they were going to do a drug test, and he had taken that.
You don't know what it was he took?
Not really. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think he did say it was Oxy.
So, was that the beginning of
the downfall?
Yeah.
After him coming home, yes. Because that was I think that was in January, and by March, he had been working full time, and my parents were asking, could you give us I told him he had to help pay for, whatever. You're staying there, you're an adult, you can pay some rent. And it wasn't astronomical, or always had some excuse why he couldn't pay him.
Right, so
he had new shoes.
Going?
He had new shoes, he had new clothes. This kid had more clothes than you could imagine. And at the end, I was like, where are they? This is what it's come to. He sold his clothes for drugs. Where did they go? And so when he was asked to leave my parents, he did find a place to stay. A friend of his said he could go stay at, his father was looking for a roommate, or had a room for rent. So he went and stayed there. That didn't last very long. And then that's when I told him, I said, you know what? I said, if you can't pay people to stay at their places, you're going to be out in the streets. And if that happens, you can, we'll get you help, and you can come home. I don't need help. I'm like, okay. I'm not doing anything, he says. I'm like, whatever. I said, if the worst gets to worst, Kyle, you can just go to the Salvation Army. They have beds. He basically said, I'm better than that. That's beneath me. I will never do that. And then a few weeks later, I find out he's living in a tent in the field somewhere.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
I'm Lauren.
I am Ken.
And you may recognize our voices from the podcast Paradise After Dark.
Dark.
But today we're here to tell you about a nonprofit organization we have created called the Florida Themis Project.
Themis is the Greek goddess of justice, in case you're wondering about the name.
The Florida Themis Project aims to support loved ones and victims of unsolved crimes by financially contributing to various types of investigative tools, including DNA testing.
We also help families and loved ones of missing people by assisting with awareness campaigns, helping with ground searches, or any other assistance that we can provide to the families.
So we are asking for your help to spread the word and grow our organization so we can help as many people as possible.
Please be sure to check out our website at floridathemisproject.org for info about how you can help us or donate.
We are also on Facebook and Instagram at Florida Themis Project.
Even something simply as sharing our posts on social media is very helpful.
For the month of August, we are doing a public awareness campaign for the unsolved murder of Kyle Byrtus in Lehigh Acres, Florida.
You can hear our podcast episode about the case and read more on the blog on our website. Again, that's floridathemisproject.org. That's FLORIDATHEMIS project.org.
And if you're planning on being at CrimeCon in Orlando this year, stop by the Paradise After Dark podcast table on Podcast Row and say hello. We'd love to tell you more.
Thanks in advance, true crime friends, for your help and support.
His uncle and grandfather drove over there and found him at his apartment. He agreed to come home and get sober. The family had several places lined up for rehab, but Kyle refused to go. He moved in with his grandparents because they were retired and home most of the time, so they could keep an eye on him.
When Kyle moved back home to get clean, he talked about his drug use and how he could afford the pills with his mother. He said that he was a middleman. He would get some pills from a supplier and then sell a few here or there and just take payment in the form of that pill. He admitted that he was up to 10 to 12 pills a day. Taking the pills orally were not working anymore, so he started shooting up.
Back home, Kyle stayed sober for a short time, but then, as he became a bit more independent, he fell back into using, after being with his grandparents for a year. At this point, his mother and grandparents refused to let him live with them until he got clean. For the following few months, he lived couch to couch, and at one point he was living in a tent off Summerlin Road near the Pine Manor neighborhood in Fort Myers. At this point, Kyle was already known to frequent an area in South Fort Myers called Pine Manor. Pine Manor is a neighborhood known for drugs and criminal activity. It's roughly half a square mile and has a population of approximately 4,000 people. According to AreaVibes.com and HomeFacts.com, the overall crime rate of the Pine Manor neighborhood is 43% higher than the national average. For every 100,000 people, there are 11 crimes daily. In Pine Manor, you have a 1 in 25 chance of becoming a victim of crime. The number of total year-over-year crimes in Pine Manor has increased by 19%. So, needless to say, this was a bad area.
Whenever there's a drug bust in Pine Manor, I will email them. Are you going to be questioning these people? I want to be sure that this is done. And sometimes I get a response, sometimes I don't.
And Lynn, that was going to be one of the questions I had actually written down here, because you mentioned that in a prior email that when they do a drug bust, you call or you email and you make sure that, or you ask them to.
I want them.
Why is that?
Yeah, I want them to know that because I feel somebody in Pine Manor still knows.
Yeah.
They knew Kyle. They may know something.
And I think this is where you may be able to fill in the blanks for us as far as, in the news reports that we found, it all said he had connections to Pine Manor. Did you know who was he hanging out with? What was he doing in Pine Manor?
That is what really blows our mind. We don't know. We don't know if it's just, he was, like I said, this one point in time, he had this little tent. It was like a little pup tent. It was a kid's tent. It was red, yellow, green, and blue. And it was off of Summerlin, back by these power poles in a field between Pine Manor and there's another apartment complex on Summerlin. And he said that's where he was staying right now. So I could drive down the road. I could see that from Summerlin. And every time I would drive by, I'd just say a quick prayer, whatever. And he was never seen there. But I don't know if he just basically drifted into Pine Manor, and because that's where you can get drugs. And so the detective actually told me that, I learned more about the heroin trade working Kyle's case than he ever imagined.
Then in June of 2013, he was arrested for petty theft. He was finding receipts in the Walmart parking lot, going inside to find the item, and then he returned it for cash. And he called his mother 4 days after his arrest, asking her to come bail him out.
Google Tell Link. This call may be recorded or monitored. I have a collect call from an inmate at Lee County Jail. Thank you. Hello? Hey, Mom. Hey. What's up? Nothing. So, what happened? I know it's for petty theft. I would find a receipt outside in the parking lot, and I'd go in and grab that item, or a couple items on the receipt, and return them to get cash back. Anyways, I talked to a bailiff's bondsman, and they said, I only need $100 to get out. I'm starving. People are taking my food. I can't stay in here until the 9th of July. Okay, now are you allowed to call every day? Yeah. But I'm saying if I give the bailiff's bondsman someone's number that I know, and they can vouch that I can come back and pay them, then it's only $100 to get me out. Let me just say, it's just going to have to be another day.
I think the last time I saw him was when he was staying at the house. He was renting that room. And I did feel sorry for him. I didn't want him to starve. I went and bought him a loaf of bread, a jar of peanut butter, paper towels, and toilet paper. Because he'd used up all this guy's, and the guy was mad because he'd used up all his paper towels. and wasn't. I said, just give this to him. And he was hungry. So I said, got peanut butter and bread. I think I may have bought some lunch meat. I gave him a hug. He started crying. That's when I told him, we'll help you out. You need to, let's do this. And then he said no. He was going to get another job. So he got another job, and he was doing very well at this other restaurant. And one day, I guess he was just so high that that was in May of 2013, because it was right after his birthday. In June, he was fired at the end of May, because I did talk to the owner of the restaurant after he died, because she did call me, and she said he was one of the best waiters she ever had. But she goes, I just couldn't take it anymore. He was just standing, she goes, the last day I saw him there, he was standing at the register and he was just swaying back and forth. He was like, his eyes were closed and everything. He was just out of it. He would shower, he actually was sneaking into a gym, into the shower rooms, and taking showers before he had to go to work. Because he was sleeping in that tent and riding a bicycle
I was just going
to
to
the
say,
restaurant.
Was he homeless at that time?
Yeah.
When was he arrested at Walmart?
He was fired in May of 2013. In June, I think it was June 19th of 2013, he was arrested. And I did not know that until it was about 3 or 4 days later. He finally called and wanted me to bail him out. And, it was only $100, contact the bail bondsman and whatever. And I was like, if I do this, you need help. I don't need help. I can do this on my own. I'll pee in a cup every day. Just get me out of here. Well, I started thinking he'd been in there already for 3 or 4 days. He was going through withdrawal. Right. He needed out of there, and he was going to tell me anything. And I said, if you cannot tell me you'll go get help, I cannot get you out of there. Well, I actually looked into what visitation was and who the judge was on that case, because I wanted to talk to the judge, send them a letter or whatever, and tell them, this is his first time for theft, and he has a drug problem. Can we do instead of sentencing him or fining him or anything, can you send him to Teen Challenge? Because they do that. They can court mandate him to go to Teen Challenge or wherever. I had plans on going to visit him, and then I was going to talk to the judge. And when I called in for visitations, they had just let him out.
Was he bailed out, or?
No.
They just let him go?
They just let him go. First offense, let him go.
So what happened after he was released? That was in June, right? That was in
June, and that was the last time I ever talked to him on the phone. Or talked to him, period. My brother-in-law would drive. They live in South Fort Myers, so it was very close to Pine Manor. He would drive through there occasionally. And he did see him one day riding a bicycle. So he stopped him, and he was just talking to him, hey man, how you doing, whatever. And you need to call your mom. He goes, I can't, but just tell her I love her. And he said he seemed very cautious. Apparently in that neighborhood, if you're seen talking to somebody that's not from that neighborhood, you could probably get yourself in trouble. Because somebody actually came out of a house and said, Kyle, you okay? I said, yeah, I'm fine. It's just my uncle. Oh, okay. So,
yeah,
and I think that was...
Maybe the thought would be that if you're talking to somebody that wasn't from the area, that they maybe were a deputy or something, or...
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
That's speculation on my part, but I'm sure that,
Well, it's probably pretty accurate.
Can you tell us about the day that Kyle was found?
We had actually left town. We were going to visit my husband's son and family in Mississippi. And we drove up there. We were having dinner, and Gary gets a phone call on his cell phone. And we were eating dinner, so he just, dismisses it. And it rings again. He dismisses it. He doesn't know the number. Finally gets a text message, and it says, this is about Kyle Byrtus. Please call. And so he just hands me the phone. He didn't really read the message. He said it's Kyle or something. And so he just handed it to me. So I just called back. He told me it was, Detective so-and-so. And I walked outside of the restaurant. They asked me where we were. And I told him we were in Mississippi. He said, what town? So I told him. He goes, where are you at right now? I said, I'm at a restaurant. I don't even know the name of it. He goes, can you be at your hotel in an hour? I said, yeah. I said, can you tell me, is my son okay? I'm sorry, I can't say anything right now at this point in time. And of course I was a basket case by that time. I walked back into the restaurant and said, we've got to go. Something's wrong with Kyle. We've got to go. And so we went back to the hotel and waited for 2 freaking hours for the local cop to come. And by that time, I'd been on the phone with the detective, I don't know how many times, saying, there is nobody here. Can you please tell me what's going on? He goes, I'll call you back in a few minutes. So he called me back. He goes, this is not a standard procedure, but please know we at the Lee County Sheriff's Department are sorry to tell you that your son has been killed. I don't even know if those were the right words or whatever, because I was in total shock. And then 5 minutes later, the local town cops show up to tell us, and I didn't even talk to him because I was so furious. So I told, I said, well, we're 12 hours away. We'll be home tomorrow. And he said, okay. Well, we didn't stay. We just got in the car and drove right back. Met with the detectives the next day. They took our statements and told us as little as they possibly could. And I can visualize the conversation, almost to the point down to what clothes I was wearing and everything. The night it was a very long night. It's been a long 5 years. I did initially ask them if it was self-inflicted because of his mental state, wondering if the drugs had just got to him. He didn't want to live like this anymore. You see this on TV, this is the only way I'm going to be free. That went through my head. Did he just kill himself because he figured that was the only way out of it? And they told me no. And then I asked, well, was his body dumped there? Or was he killed there? And that's when they told me they couldn't tell me that information right then and there because of the rain and everything. It was very muddy and rainy when they found his body, I guess.
Do they know how long he had been there before he was found?
They say they don't have an exact time. I've actually looked up because of apparently the news press, or was it NBC2, used the exact words that was on the incident report about the buzzards flying around. And so I looked up, how long does the body lay there before a buzzard starts flying around? This is where my mind went a few times. And it doesn't really, it's just, it actually, I believe it said 12, 24 hours. They can sense it or whatever. They haven't given me an exact time. I asked them if, how did you come about the date of August 15th? Because unfortunately that's my brother's birthday. So we always say he was killed before that because we don't, it's hard to associate the two. I've asked time and time again about, any evidence. There's nothing.
On August 15th of 2013, Kyle's body was found in a field near Meadow Road in Lehigh Acres, Florida. When we originally told you this story, we told you that Kyle was found and that his cause of death was a single gunshot wound. Since then, we have learned that, as we mentioned in the beginning, his hands were tied behind his back and he had several gunshot wounds, one to his head, several to his torso, and one to his right forearm. This information, sadly, was only revealed recently in another podcast episode created by the Lee County Sheriff's Office. And I'm not trying to bash the Lee County Sheriff's Office in any way, but I'm going to point out the fact that not even Lynn, Kyle's mother, knew these details until she heard it on the podcast episode. When I heard this, I was horrified and heartbroken. More on that situation when we speak to Lynn after this episode.
Yeah, and as strange as it may sound, the initial incident report from Lee County Sheriff's Office stated that foul play was not suspected and it was not considered a crime scene. What? I mean, we may have bought that back before we knew the details of how Kyle was found, but now...
Yeah, I don't understand. Now we know that he was found with his hands tied behind his back and he was shot several times. How could you even say that foul play is not suspected and they didn't consider it a crime scene?
Exactly.
There was some contradictions in the incident report as well. And strangely, Lynn was never even made aware of this report and only obtained a copy after we did back in 2018 and sent it to her. What's going on here, Lee County?
Well, there's very little information in any reports we could obtain from LCSO. Now, according to Kyle's mother, they had not really told her much either.
I did ask them, was this self-inflicted, and they told me no. And then I asked, was the body dumped there, or was he killed there, or whatever, and they could not answer that. They said at this point in time, we do not know. It's very hard to tell because there was not much evidence gathered at the scene.
But there was no weapon found at the scene, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, because we notice at the top, it is marked in the incident report, they do mark felony, which means obviously that it is a crime, so it wouldn't be considered a suicide if they're calling it a felony. So is that what we're asking?
Yeah, well, I was just curious as to why they didn't consider it a crime scene, because I know that if they found a weapon, they could have assumed it was a suicide, and then they wouldn't say it's a crime scene, but it does say felony at the top of the incident report, so obviously they knew a crime was committed. So maybe they just didn't consider it a crime scene because there was nothing they could process?
That's a very good question, and I'm just going to have to, I will ask the detectives that. I mean, like I said, I just got this report, didn't even know it was available. No one told me about it until in speaking to you, so I am definitely going to contact the detective I have now, and I actually emailed her this afternoon in reference to that. I just wanted clarification on the foul play suspected, number 24, where it says no.
Right. Yeah, that was going to be one of my questions
immediately,
for you.
That was one of my, when I first got this the other day, I questioned that myself. I said, what? So I had to look at it, and I just came to the conclusion maybe they were discussing the person that, found his body.
Right.
Because it's in that, that highlighted square there.
And that could be.
But I didn't even, to be totally honest, I just kept dwelling on that one area, and I don't think I caught that thing about this no crime scene or anything, so, yeah, that's a bit disturbing.
It's really strange, and it's strange that you didn't have a copy of this. I mean,
you would think that they would supply you with that.
Right.
Yes.
Part of my mind does go, okay, they came across this kid in the field. It's a drug addict.
Yeah, I'll have to agree with you, because we do see in some of the things that we see and we read research, a lot of times if the police are aware of the person and if they do a lot of drugs, they just kind of, they look at them as not, I don't want to say not human, but they look at them differently than they would just some random person. And unfortunately, that's the case. They forget that regardless of what they do drug-wise or, whether they're a criminal or not, that they are still human. And I think a lot of times they forget that.
Well, that night, I believe that's what they thought. They don't think that anymore because I did write Sheriff Scott a letter. And I told him that that body that you found in the field was my son.
Good for you.
He was loved by many, many people. And I went in depth about other things, about his, you may not have found any of his belongings, but he had a closet full of clothes. He was a very proud person of, how he looked. It was always joked about. There was never a hair out of place, and a hurricane couldn't blow his hair down because he used so much hair gel. And it just, I did get a phone call after he passed the letter on to captain of major crimes. And he's been wonderful. He's the person that I can go to and get answers from.
So what answers do they have?
Well, when I say answers, I mean like, one time I did ask about a certain person that was arrested on drugs or whatever. And he just says, just watch the news and we can discuss this again tomorrow. They had actually done a big bust in Pine Manor. This was a couple years ago. And I just wanted to make sure that I think I had asked him question about, has anything ever, come about? Have you checked with people in Pine Manor lately? Whatever. I think it was right after I sent out the postcards last year. I think they were kind of putting all the postcards that we had sent out, and this crime bust was all done together. And whether anybody, has said anything, obviously they didn't, or, nothing's been done. In my heart of hearts, I do believe they may know who did it, or it could be a group of people, but they just don't have the evidence for that one person that pulled the trigger. I like to speculate and think I know because I can Facebook stalk all kinds of people.
You're not alone.
And, I put two and two together. Okay, this is a friend of this person. This is a friend of this person. And it's just in my head, in my, it's the way my brain works anymore. And one person in particular, I really thought this person may know something. I don't know this person. His Facebook page is completely private. Nobody can get into it. I can't even get into it. Except for his friends. And somebody did say something to me that somebody said, I can't believe you're gone. I just saw you last night.
Somebody wrote that on Kyle's Facebook page before or right after.
No, it was after. Yeah.
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 Huh.
And the police are obviously aware of this?
Yes.
Well, the police should be able to subpoena the Facebook page.
It's been, I think they saw that. So they were able to see that. They know the person, but I've also been told by I think it was the third detective that I had, that this person was not going to make or break the case.
So maybe they had already looked into it, you think?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I know they have.
Okay.
Because I was obsessed about that. I don't understand it. I just don't understand. I've had so many people says, this seems to be a simple murder. I don't know what they mean by that, but I had a friend, not a friend, but one of Kyle's friends. She's in criminology and everything. And she goes, I don't get it. She goes, why can't they find anything? And that's where I think it's because he was a drug addict. They let things slide through in the beginning. And until they realized, and this is off. Well, it doesn't matter. I don't care. I think they know how I feel sometimes.
Okay.
But I get frustrated at times because I don't get any answers, but then I understand either there might not be any answers or there are answers and they just can't say anything.
Yeah, I do know that a lot of times the police will keep a lot close to the vest, not even telling the family because, you know, say they do have a suspect and they bring him in, they're going to have information that only the killer would know.
Oh, exactly, yeah.
So, and I'm sure you know this, but I'm kind of for our listeners. That's you know what maybe why they're not telling you everything that they know if they know more than they say they do.
Yeah, and they at one point in time they did say that they had, and they never ever give me any names, but they had heard that someone they had spoken to in the very beginning had gotten sober and thought maybe, they'd get in touch with him. He had moved out of town. He or she, to be totally honest, I'm really not quite sure. They had moved out of town and they were hoping, because they had gotten sober and they wanted to talk to that person. Well, they tried to get in touch with them and they said that they've fallen off the face of the earth. So they don't know if they've gotten back into drugs or what. But so my thing is, yes, it happened here, but people who are on drugs could be anywhere. They could leave this town and go somewhere else.
Yeah.
You just never know where somebody might know Kyle.
So
why hasn't anyone come forward? Do you think that there's an unwritten rule in that area? Keep your mouth shut. Yeah, that's what I was.
After the research on Kyle and talking with Lynn, his mother, there's one thing we know for sure. Kyle was a great person who just made some bad choices and ultimately lost his life.
Well, there's days I don't want to say numb, but I just go through the motions of doing everything I have to do to get through the day. I work full time. I, come home, cook dinner for the two of us, and we live in our little home and go on each day. Then there are times, especially when I'm driving. My husband and I drive together to work. He drops me off in Bonita and then he goes on into Naples. And there are days we drive separately. Those days when it's separate, I will sometimes crank up the radio a little too loud, listening to music that Kyle would listen to.
Now, I saw in an interview that you have his iPod.
I do. I don't listen with. It's not working properly anymore. It was for a while, but it was a very old iPod. But I still do have it. I don't have much of his stuff. I have that, his trophies, his letter jacket, his graduation gown and cap, and pictures.
So, what are your plans, if any, to carry on and keep this case in the spotlight and help or keep it out there so hopefully someone comes forward? I mean, is there another flyers going to go out, the billboards, anything?
There aren't any plans as of right now. What I do on a personal level is on Facebook, I do the boost of either the picture of the flyer, one of our news stories, or the billboard. The one with the billboard, I think, really has drawn in more. I've reached, if I remember correctly, the last total number that I reached was over 16,000 people. And, I figure I can afford $40, $50 a month if it finds an answer. So that's what I do on a, personal level. Of course, I would like to be able to do the postcards all the time. They've also, I do know, you've heard about the playing cards that they hand out to the jails.
Yes.
I know they just did some several months ago, and Kyle's picture is on the back of a card somewhere.
That's good.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's one of the things. I don't know if you said you listened to the Felipe Santos and Terrence Williams. I'm sorry. Look at they did the playing cards as well, and they actually got several leads.
For Felipe Santos. On one of those cards.
Yeah. Well, they people had recognized him in anything. I mean, so you're just trying to get somebody to recognize, and I think that's really a good thing because, when people hear names, that's great. But me, I'm a facial guy. I have great facial recognition, but I'm bad with names. So I think that's really a good thing.
Yeah.
That's excellent.
So I usually try to do something at his birthday and also on the, anniversary of his death. Those are my two major pushes. Of course, if, Crime Stoppers wanted to do a story every week, that'd be fine with me. But sadly, there's too much else going on in this town. And so sometimes I've actually said at one point in time, this has got to stop because my file keeps getting piled on top of, more files are getting piled on top of Kyle's file and it's going to get lost. They say it's not, but the newer, fresher cases.
Well, and that's why it's great for you to mention that and do things. And that's one of the things that we like to do is, if it somehow gets out there a little bit and it gets heard, that brings that file back to the top again, and then it gets a chance to maybe be revisited a little bit.
You may not have known, whoever may not have known Kyle like his friends and his family did, but you took away a light. People always, they always ask, what do I miss the most about him? And I always said his smile. But I started thinking about that just a few weeks ago. And it was like, no, I just miss everything about him. The way he would smack his food when he ate. He could be sitting watching TV and just burst out laughing. And I'd laugh thinking of him. He got me to watch the stupid Christmas movie. I just had to watch it because it was hysterical. And that was when Elf first came out. And so now, the first year I couldn't watch it, but now I watch it and I laugh and I cry because he got me to watch that movie. And to hear him laugh when he was watching that, he worked with my brother-in-law. I want to tell this one story because it's really funny. My brother-in-law worked for a company that traveled all over, and he would go out and scope venues for speaking engagements. And he would take a crew along with him. And sometimes Kyle went with him to help set up chairs or do whatever. They were in a hotel, and my nieces were with them. And they were going up the elevator, and he just looked at him, and he just hit all the buttons, just like Buddy the Elf did in the movie. And they just started cracking up. And he actually mentioned, something about Buddy. But every time I see that episode, I think of him being in an elevator. And I wasn't even there. But they tell me that story, and we always start laughing and cracking up. But just, sometimes I think, he's just going to walk through that door. And this was just all a dream. But I don't think it is. I'm awake. And I do feel the pain. I still see a white Camaro sometimes, and I think, is that his old car? I see somebody walking down the street in a pair of cargo shorts, like he always wore those beige cargo shorts. Flip-flops and a t-shirt. Could that be him? Were they wrong? And 5 years is just too long to not know anything.
Yeah, I agree. And that
Even though I know there's other people out there that have, it's been longer than that. And I'm sorry. I really, my heart breaks for them too.
So, Ken, we are back with Lynn. Hi, Lynn.
Hey, Lauren.
Hello,
Hi,
Lynn.
Ken. Hi, Ken.
Hello.
Thank you so much, Lynn, for joining us again. It's been a long time since we recorded and talked about Kyle. What have you been up to since the last time we did this?
I'm just still plugging along, trying to find answers, get more answers. I continue to search out different ways of trying to get the story out. Other than that, work, a little bit of play. I guess it's just mainly just continuing on with my fight.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that you said to us when we talked before, you mentioned about, because you're the only one really fighting, for him. So, I mean, you still feel like, that's the case. Like you've got to push on like the sheriff's office or, trying to get his name out there and find out more information.
Okay, I don't want to take those words back, but, and make it sound like I'm the only one doing this. I do have family behind me. I guess I'm just kind of like the face and the one that does all the speaking. My family is behind me 100% in everything that I do. And as far as detectives and Crime Stoppers is when I go to them, they're very receptive on what, ideas that I may have. I have a detective now that I would say he's probably my favorite. He is very receptive he gets back to me on a timely basis. He gives me answers. Not all answers, but, he'll take time out. He's come to visit me at my place of work a few times to answer questions and whatever.
So things are a little bit better now than 5 years ago.
Yes, definitely.
Well, that's really good to hear. And I know that since we did this episode, it was November of 2018, and it just doesn't even seem like that long ago, but that was almost 5 years ago. What have you done in the meantime as far as keeping Kyle's name in the spotlight and keeping his story alive? I know, you've done a couple different podcasts and things like that. Can you fill us in on, some of the different things that you've done?
I definitely every year, either at his birthday or at the anniversary of his death, I do try to get in contact with Crime Stoppers to see if anybody wants to do a story. I don't like to talk to people in front of the camera or whatever, but this is for Kyle. And yeah, as you said, I've done several podcasts. I'm trying to think, I think I've done several pushes with, I think after we talked and you had pointed out something that somebody else was doing on Facebook, and that was, I think it's called crowdsourcing, but where I purchase like an ad, but it's not really an ad, and I can push that post to certain zip codes or whatever on Facebook. I've done that many times. I haven't done it in the last few years, but I was thinking of doing it again, maybe in a different area, to find out if, maybe I should widen the horizons a little.
Oh yeah, crowd solving. So you've been boosting posts on Facebook and targeting certain areas. Would it be safe to say that you're targeting the Pine Manor area?
Yes.
And do you still feel like the answers lie within Pine Manor?
There's some answers there, and I think, his body was found in Lehigh. Is it possible that someone there knows something?
Yeah.
So, and I think, there could be answers in there too.
Well, that makes perfect sense. I mean, any particular reason why he would have been in Lehigh that night versus being near where he was staying in Pine Manor?
If I remember correctly, there was one podcast that the sheriff's department put out, and they did state he was in Lehigh.
Like he had been staying in
So,
Lehigh, or he
not
just
staying, but him and several other people, they would go to a house or whatever in Lehigh. And I really should have listened to that podcast once again so I could remember. But there was something in that podcast where somebody lived in a house somewhere in Lehigh, and they were visiting it, whether it was a supplier or they were selling to that person. I don't remember. And I don't know who that person is or anything. I just remember one of the person that they interviewed, I believe her name was Tatiana. She said, they were in Lehigh.
Lynn, you're referring to the podcast that's done by the Lee County Sheriff's Office, right? Is that the one you're referring to?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, Seeking Closure. That's the name of their podcast.
Yeah, the one that gave me all kinds of information that I didn't know about.
That's what I want to talk about. I want to ask about that. So, and this was kind of disturbing in a lot of ways. Lauren messaged me one night and she said, "Hey, listen to this podcast." So I said, okay. She sends me a link and I start listening. And then like 10 minutes into it, I call her and we're literally like very upset. So I can only imagine what you were feeling at the time. So can you kind of describe sort of what you were feeling when you listened to that?
Well, looking back, I was excited that the sheriff's department was doing a podcast and they could get it out there, because a lot of people follow the sheriff's department. So that's even more people to hear the story. I saw that they had posted it. I think it was like early on a Sunday morning or a Monday morning. I can't remember. And I had got no notification that it was being put out because I kept asking about it. Is this person going to be calling me? Is he going to talk to me or anything? And boom, there it was. I was excited. And I read a portion of what the Facebook post said and I went, wow. Okay, I didn't know that. And I reposted it and I said something to the fact, this is really raw, blah, blah, blah. But take a listen. I hadn't listened to it yet. And I didn't really listen to it until a day later. And everyone was messaging me and saying, "Oh, Lynn, I'm so sorry. I can't believe everything, have you listened to this?" And a friend of mine called me and she's like, so who is, and she said, Choo Choo. And I said, I don't know. I said, what are you talking about? And she said, "Lynn, they've named names. You don't know any of this?" And I said, "No, I guess it's time for me to listen." Because part of me wanted to listen and I just have to be in the right frame of mind sometimes. And so I was just totally taken aback, not believing that this information was just put out there and I did not know anything about it. So I immediately called the detective and they set up a meeting with me and he took full responsibility, which, it wasn't his fault. There were other detectives, previous that could have told me this information. They told me that, and when they mentioned Tatiana's name, I began like, well, crap, in there is her actual interview with the detectives right after Kyle's death. And I'm thinking, what about her safety? I was worried about her. But then again, it was like, okay, no, maybe she knows something. Maybe, this will bring her out or whatever. But she's not really, I think they've got everything that they can from her. And that's maybe why they released her name and those 2 or 3 other guys' names. But, I was totally taken aback. And I wasn't mad at first. I was just more in shock. And then it started sinking in. I was like, okay, they know more than what they're letting on. And I am sure there's a ton more of information that, they're not going to release. which I understand. But yeah, total shock.
I'll just say I can only imagine the shock that she was feeling, because there was things that being said that you had no idea. And I couldn't imagine being a parent in your situation and then having to hear this sort of third party, if you will.
Yeah, and I asked them, I said, why wasn't, because in it talked about how his body was found, 3 gunshot wounds. And I came right out and asked, I said, no one ever told me. I said, but on the death certificate, it says gunshot to the head. So he goes, well, yes, that's how he died. They are really kind of flip, if you want to use that word, at the beginning. Was kind of like, well, do you really need to know all details? And I'm like, I am one that wants to know every single detail. Yes. And so just little things, like that kind of bothered me, that I didn't know that. And I don't blame anybody. I guess maybe not everybody wants to know everything, but I do. I still want to know the toxicology report, and I can't get that, even though that doesn't have anything to do with it. But
you still don't know that information?
No, I haven't asked in a while. But when I did ask about 5 or 6 years ago, they said because it's an ongoing investigation, they can't release the paperwork. Because that's what I emailed the medical examiner. And they said they couldn't, the file is zipped or whatever. They can't release information. No, like I said, I haven't asked in a while. But
well, I'm sure it's something that you've got to put down every now and then and sort of pick up as you can feel. Because I can't imagine that as you find information out, it's got to be somewhat overwhelming. So you have to sort of compartmentalize everything before you can reach out.
Everybody's not on me, but everybody says, so have you talked to a detective lately? Have you contacted them? Blah, blah, blah. And I said, no. I don't want to say bother them, because I'm not bothering them. It's their job. I don't reach out all the time just because I don't know what else to ask. And there are times I just don't want to deal with it. I always will think of Kyle. But there are just sometimes I just have to, like you said, push it to the back burner and gear back up. And I always gear up in July for the anniversary. Part of me, I had a bad few days past week or two, knowing that it's coming up. But it's like, okay, no, I gotta stay strong.
So aside from the new information that we unfortunately learned from a podcast, has there been any progress made in the case that you're aware of?
I believe so.
Do you get the feeling that there's any progress being made? I mean, do they make you okay?
Yes.
All right. Does this new detective seem optimistic?
Yes.
Good.
It's good news.
So does his boss.
Is there a new boss?
Yes.
One of the things that I like, I mean, it was horrible. I mean, I'm what, if you've ever listened to the show, you know that I'm one of those guys that I'm like, something good comes from something bad. And quite frankly, initially listening to the Lee County Sheriff's Office podcast, I was like, this is bad. This is not good. There's different ways they should have handled this. But in all honesty, it's one of those things where, okay, that's great. Maybe it's not the right format, but at least the information's out there. And this kind of opened the door for you to speak with them and potentially have a little bit better relationship. Am I right in saying that? I mean, would you agree with that?
Most definitely. Most definitely.
That's
I
good.
did walk away. I did have a meeting with them afterwards, after the podcast came out. It was several weeks, I think. But I did leave feeling confident that, it wasn't hopeless. Like there was a time within the last year that it was just like I was about to just give up. It was like, this is hopeless. This is never gonna So maybe this podcast, in a, like you said, in a way, gave me that hope. And I don't like the way it came about, but yes, it turned out good. And I feel I have a better relationship with the Lee County Sheriff's Office now than I did before.
And obviously a lot more information on the case, which is what you've been trying to get all along. I remember in our initial interview, I think one of the things we talked about was trying to get the police reports and things. And I mean, I put in for the information, but of course, everything we got back, which was a very small amount of information, we supplied you back then, and it really wasn't much. So this is like a whole treasure trove of information that came out in this podcast. Maybe not the greatest format, but at least the information was available to you, so you knew these things so you could address them.
Exactly. And what, I don't know if, Lauren, do you remember, and Ken, I'm sorry, back, I think, was it November of last year or even 2 years ago, that I got the call about from the evidence room with Lee County Sheriff's Office about the gun.
Yes, I remember that.
And that's what spurred this new detective. I guess whether I ruffled feathers or whatever, I don't know, but having them call me and telling me that a gun that was stolen from our house in 2013 had been there since 2015, and I was just getting that call 7 years later that it's just been there and they were getting ready to destroy it. And it's like, well, we want that gun. Don't destroy it.
And they have never tested that, have they?
Yes, they did.
Oh, they did.
They did send it off, and unfortunately, it didn't have anything to do with Kyle's. It was not the gun that shot him, which I guess I'm glad to know that one of our guns was not one that killed him.
Right. I was thinking, this is just how my mind goes. He was tied up, correct? His hands?
Yes.
Now, my mind immediately goes to, if somebody tied a rope, there's touch DNA on that rope. Have you asked about any type of DNA or anything from the crime scene that may be usable?
Not enough.
Maybe I'm just giving you ideas.
Yes, you are. I've got a pen in my hand. I'm writing that down.
Well, because the things they're doing with DNA now, every single day you're hearing about. I mean, they just caught the Long Island serial killer.
I know.
It's amazing, and I love it. And so, when I heard that episode, when I started hearing those details, my mind immediately goes to, okay, well, there could be DNA on that rope. If there was rope there, whatever was left, at the scene, what are they doing? Are they testing? Are they testing anything? Or do we just not know?
I do not know. I remember at the time when I was back in the beginning, asking about DNA and, fingerprints on this, fingerprints on that. They just kept telling me, well, it was in August. It had been raining, everything was muddy. And that's why at that time they didn't know if he had been, killed there or if his body was dumped there. They had no evidence of that one way or the other, and everything was just wet. And I have brought up to them, not recently, but the MVAC, about being able to pull DNA off, even if it was, wet and all that stuff. But I never once thought about the rope.
Yeah, that would be a question I would pose to the detective. Just, is there any way that you could get touch DNA? We leave skin cells on everything we touch, so it's almost impossible to get away with anything now, which is great.
Yeah, there's a good chance he didn't tie himself up. So obviously that does leave a door open. it still boggles my mind just to find that information out. And it was like, because we looked into everything, we did as much research as we could, we pulled police reports, and nothing like that was listed in the police report, which really, listening to it in that podcast, it was like, wow, it almost changed the way I want to pull information and try to get information for the case, because I felt horrible. Like, man, I wish I could have gotten more information, but I had submitted everything I was normally used to submitting, but I couldn't get any of this information that they're supplying now. But then hearing that you didn't have that information either, Lynn, kind of like, well, maybe that's just something they were holding, sort of close to the vest, if you will, and then eventually released it, as time progressed, as something that would lead to more, information, or someone talking or putting more information out there for the public to bring, Kyle's murderer to justice.
Lynn, this is going to be a tough question, but we are coming up on the 10-year anniversary. How are you feeling about that?
Some days I'm numb. Other days it's like, really, 10 years already? It's like, it seems just, a few years ago that we got that phone call. It is a nightmare that I wish I could wake up from. I don't know, it's just weird not having him around. He's, I would love to hear his voice, and to hear his voice on that podcast. I did rewind that part. I could not tell you how many times just to hear his voice, even though that was the last conversation that we had, and it wasn't a pleasant one. But to hear his voice.
Are you referring to the jailhouse call?
Yes.
Okay. I listened to that a few times too, because I wanted to kind of listen to his voice, to sort of put the voice with the face, to sort of humanize him, if you will, instead of just talking about somebody we've read about.
Yeah. I have one snippet of a video that I found on a friend's Facebook page, and it's from, oh gosh, I don't know if it was, he went to Bonnaroo one year. It's a big, have you ever heard of Bonnaroo?
Oh yeah. Yes.
Okay. And there is a video of him. It just cracks me up. I will send it to you, Lauren. You don't have to play it, but just to see him. And then he was there with two girls, and it's very short, but it's hysterical. He had such a sense of humor, and he always, where he got his speaking ability, and I don't know, he didn't get it from me because I can't put two words together sometimes. But I go back and I look at that quite often just to put a smile on my face, even knowing he was probably high as a kite. But August is not, I have several bad months throughout the year. May, because it's his birthday and it's Mother's Day. It just really sucks. And then August, because it's the anniversary of his death. Very mixed emotions, because he was found on my brother's birthday. So that's just a very emotional day.
So it's been rough. 10 years is a long time. But you do have a better outlook at this point than you did 5 years ago, right?
I do.
And do you still have faith that there will be justice?
I have more faith now, yes.
Good. So what's next for you and Kyle's case? Is there anything coming down the pipe? Anything we should be looking out for? Any plans we can help you with?
I am getting ready I haven't put it together yet, but I was going to email Crime Stoppers and the Sheriff's Department to see about putting up the billboard again.
Oh, that would be great.
And to find out if they want to put it in Pine Manor where they had it the first time, Or would it be better suited on Colonial, right before you get to Fowler? There's a big sign that they always put Crime Stopper stuff on. As you're headed west, there's a sign on the left-hand side. Or further into Lehigh. I don't know. So that's on my list of things to do this week.
Okay. Do you think that they could get it together in time for...
Well, they had a sign up once before.
Right.
It was a digital sign, so they have all the artwork and everything. So yes, I'm sure they can pop that right into their screen and do it.
Well, definitely let me know if that happens, because I'd like to drive by there and take a new photo, and so we can blast it out on our socials and everything.
Okay, definitely.
And
one of the best things that I think that I've found in this case is we spoke to Lynn early on. Well, actually, in the original interview, and she had said that, she had a couple people in mind or things in mind of who it could have been. And it seems to me now that I think we kind of know, maybe based on the sheriff's office, of their own admission, that we kind of know who did this. It's just maybe they don't have the information or the evidence to put, charges, or maybe they do and they're just waiting. I'm not sure. I mean, how do you feel about that, Link? It sounds like we have more options as far as suspects, which we had very few initially back in 2018 when we did the interview.
Right. I think it might not be a matter of one of those people doing it, but one of those people I am pretty sure knows who did. What it will take to, bring them around, I don't know.
yeah, I think that this case is very solvable, and it's really, I remember when we first spoke, you had told us about the Pine Manor rule, and I'm just hoping as time goes by, the further we get away from it, people move away, people break up, alliances are broken up. Somebody knows something. I believe that 100% wholeheartedly.
I believe more than one person knows something.
And it's just going to take one person to come forward. We just need that one person to come forward. We say it all our episodes. If you see something, say something. If you know something, say something. So if anybody knows anyone, or if anybody themselves has any information, it's time. 10 years is too long. Am I right?
Absolutely. Yes. 10 years is horrible.
I want it to be over with. I want to see that person behind bars, and then I can grieve properly. Not knowing, that does not, I can't grieve Kyle the way, I'm not saying there's a proper way to do it, but I'm more focused on getting this solved than being a mother who's lost her son and thinking about that 24/7. I just need it solved. We all need it solved.
Yes.
And I want to tell you, Lynn, that when we met 5 years ago and we first spoke, and then, following each other on social media, and we've seen each other a few times, and you've been so supportive of us and our podcast. And I just want you to know that I truly admire you for your fight and your drive. I like to think that I'm a strong person, but I don't know. I don't know how I would be, honestly. I can empathize, but I cannot say that I know how you feel or what you've been through. But I can say that I truly admire your drive and the way you have not given up and not, just sunk into a depression and given up. Because that's just the worst way to be, I think.
Well, I will say that, and I've said this from the beginning, the only reason, the number one reason I'm still semi-sane and able to get through this is because of God and my faith. Because I just cannot imagine not having that. I belong to some groups, on Facebook that some days I go out there and look of parents who've lost their children or whatever, and I don't understand. Just everyone grieves differently. I understand that, but everyone is, maybe I should become angry. I don't know. They're just bitter, but I just know that I have a faith and God has always been there and kept me strong. I always feel like you guys are, right there behind me all the time.
Always.
In front of me, leading me and cheering me on. And I greatly appreciate you.
It's really nice to be able to talk to you again tonight, and really hope that this case actually goes somewhere. And it seems like we're in the right direction. And it may take time, but like Lauren was mentioning earlier about the what's the case that just got solved?
Long
Island Syrup.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. I don't know why my brain went blank. Lisk, the Gilgo Beach. That took a lot of time, but now justice is going to be served. Hopefully they've got the right guy, and hopefully the case is handled right and justice can be served. Because obviously we've seen things go wrong in different cases, but I hope in Kyle's case, someone can be brought to justice, and it seems like we're a lot closer than we were back in 2018 for sure.
Definitely.
All right, Lynn. Well, again, I want to thank you so much for talking to us, and thank you for trusting us with Kyle's story and giving us this updated little chit chat for our listeners. I think it's important that our listeners hear from you, and, thank you for talking to us again. And, like I said, August 2023, the Florida Themis Project is highlighting Kyle's case because it is the 10-year anniversary, and we're going to be pushing it really hard. So everyone listening, please share this episode, follow us on social media, share what we post. We'd really like to get a huge crowd going, crowd solving on this case. Let's get it as far and wide as we can and just blast it everywhere, because 10 years is too long.
Thank you for having me. And yes, if anyone has any other ideas of what else I could do, I am always open to a suggestion.
Yes, you're on Facebook. Friends of Kyle Byrtus is the group, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Is that the best way for people to reach out to you?
Yeah, that would be fine. Through Facebook Messengers, always good. Or, if they want to reach out to me, Lynn Krieger, that's good too.
Okay. Well, they can always reach out to us and we can put them in touch with you too.
That'll work also.
All right.
So if you guys know something, say something. That's what we got to get. We got to get Kyle's situation brought to justice. This is not fair.
Again, Kyle Alexander Byrtus was 25 years old. He was found in a field near Meadow Road in Lehigh Court in Lehigh Acres, Florida. He was known to frequent the Pine Manor community in Fort Myers. Anyone with information about Kyle's death is urged to contact the Lee County Sheriff's Office at 239-477-1000 or Southwest Florida Crime Stoppers at 1-800-780-TIPS. That's 1-800-780-8477.
All right, everyone. So that's the episode tonight. Kyle Byrtus, remember, if you know something, say something.
Yes, and check out our website. The links to all of our social media, Patreon, merch store, and more.
To learn more about the Florida Themis Project, please visit floridathemisproject.org.
And please make sure to subscribe to this show on whatever platform you're listening and rate and review. This really helps us branch out and reach a wider audience.
And as always, thank you very much for listening
to Paradise After Dark.
Dark.